The Refugee Processing Center on Station Gamma 7 was a study in organized chaos. Thousands of beings from dozens of species filled the cavernous halls, all fleeing the war that had consumed the Outer Rim territories. The air hummed with a dozen different languages, the acrid smell of fear, and the metallic tang of desperation. Jake Morrison had been volunteering at the center for 3 months, ever since his cargo hauling contract fell through and left him stranded on the station. He wasn't particularly heroic or noble. He just needed somewhere to sleep, and the refugee center offered cots to volunteers. But somewhere along the way, helping people had become more than just a means to an end. It had become the reason he got up every morning. He was distributing protein rations in Section 7 when he first saw her. She stood apart from the crowd, her orange skin dulled by exhaustion and grime, her blonde hair matted and tangled. She was Kaltari, a species Jake recognized from the database training, peaceful traders and artists known for their striking appearance and gentle nature. But what caught his attention wasn't her species. It was the small bundle she clutched against her chest, wrapped in what looked like the remnants of a thermal blanket. A baby. Jake approached slowly, keeping his movements non-threatening. Many refugees were traumatized, jumpy. "Hey there," he said softly in universal standard. "I'm Jake. I'm a volunteer here. Can I help you with anything?" The woman's eyes, a deep amber color that reminded Jake of honey, fixed on him with a mixture of hope and terror. "Please," she whispered, her accent thick but understandable. "My daughter, she's sick. I've tried to get help, but they say there's nothing they can do, that Kaltari infants aren't a priority, that the medical bay is full, but she's dying. I can feel it." Jake felt his jaw tighten. He'd heard the rumors about the medical bay's triage protocols, how certain species were deemed lower priority based on statistical survival rates and political considerations. The Kaltari homeworld had remained neutral in the war, which meant Kaltari refugees didn't get the same resources as those from allied worlds. It was bureaucratic bullshit, and it made him furious. "Let me see her," Jake said gently. The woman hesitated, then carefully pulled back the blanket. The infant inside was tiny, her orange skin tinged with gray, her breathing rapid and shallow. Even to Jake's untrained eye, it was obvious the baby was in serious distress. "What's your name?" Jake asked the mother. "Lissa," she said, "and my daughter is Myra." "Okay, Lissa, I'm going to be straight with you. The official channels aren't going to help you fast enough, but I know someone who might. Do you trust me?" Lissa studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "You're human." Humans are known for their stubbornness, yes, for refusing to accept the impossible. Jake managed a grim smile. "Something like that, come on." He led Lissa through the winding corridors of the station, avoiding the main thoroughfares where security might question why he was taking a refugee off the designated paths. Jake had spent 3 months learning every shortcut, every maintenance tunnel, every blind spot in the camera coverage. He'd never thought he'd need that knowledge for something like this, but he was grateful for it now. They emerged in the industrial sector, where the station's life support and power systems thrummed with constant activity. Jake approached a nondescript door marked "Authorized Personnel Only" and knocked in a specific pattern. 3 quick, 2 slow, 1 quick. The door opened to reveal a Vexian woman with scaled green skin and eyes that could see into the infrared spectrum. Dr. Zara Kesh was technically a fugitive, wanted by 3 different governments for practicing medicine without proper licensing. Jake had met her 2 months ago when she'd stitched up a knife wound he'd gotten breaking up a fight in the refugee quarters. She was brilliant, compassionate, and completely willing to ignore regulations if it meant saving lives. "Jake," Zara said, her voice a musical rasp, "I thought I told you to stay out of trouble." "When have I ever listened to you?" Jake replied. "I've got a sick baby, Kaltari. The medical bay won't see her." Zara's expression hardened. "Bring her in." The next 2 hours were tense. Zara examined little Myra with the kind of meticulous care that made it obvious why she'd been one of the top pediatric specialists in the galaxy before her unauthorized procedures got her blacklisted. She ran tests with equipment that looked cobbled together from spare parts, because it was, and muttered to herself in her native language. "It's Keshan flu," she finally announced. "Common enough among refugees who have been exposed to poor sanitation conditions. For most species, it's a minor illness, but Kaltari infants lack the enzyme needed to process the virus. Without treatment, she'll be dead within 6 hours." Lissa let out a sound that was half sob, half moan. Jake put a hand on her shoulder. "What does she need?" "Synthesized Kaltari enzymes, but they're species-specific and expensive. The medical bay would have them, but—" Zara trailed off, her meaning clear. "But they won't give them to us," Jake finished. He thought for a moment, running through options. "How much would it cost to synthesize the enzymes ourselves? With my equipment, assuming I could even manufacture them properly, at least 10,000 credits, and that's if everything goes perfectly, which it won't because half my equipment is held together with hope and duct tape." Jake felt his stomach sink. He had maybe 300 credits to his name. Lissa, as a refugee, had nothing. But then an idea started forming, the kind of stupid, reckless idea that had gotten him in trouble more times than he could count. "What if we didn't synthesize them?" Jake said slowly. "What if we just borrowed them from the medical bay?" Zara stared at him. "You're talking about theft from a military medical facility. I'm talking about saving a baby's life. They'll arrest you, possibly shoot you. Station security doesn't mess around." "Then I'd better not get caught." Jake turned to Lissa. "Stay here with Zara. I'll be back in an hour with what Myra needs." "Jake, wait." Lissa grabbed his arm, her amber eyes wide. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't know my daughter. Why would you risk yourself for strangers?" Jake looked down at the tiny baby in her arms, at Myra's labored breathing and gray-tinged skin. He thought about all the beings he'd seen in the refugee center over the past 3 months, the families torn apart, the children orphaned, the desperate, hopeless look in their eyes when they were told there was nothing anyone could do. "Because someone should," he said simply. "Because everyone else is saying no, and that's not good enough. Because your daughter deserves a chance at life, and if I can give her that chance, then that's what I'm going to do." He left before Lissa could respond, before his own fear could talk him out of it. Getting into the medical bay wasn't as hard as it should have been. Jake had delivered supplies there before, so the guards recognized him. He waited until the shift change, always the most chaotic time, and slipped in wearing a borrowed maintenance uniform. He moved with purpose, like he belonged there, carrying a toolkit that made him look official. The pharmacy was on the 3rd level, behind a locked door with a biometric scanner. Jake had anticipated this. He'd borrowed a security bypass device from one of the less savory refugees, a former black market dealer who owed him a favor. It took 3 tries and 2 minutes of sweating bullets, but the lock finally clicked open. The pharmacy was a maze of shelves filled with medications, vaccines, and synthesized compounds. Jake pulled out the data pad Zara had given him, which displayed what he was looking for: Calteri enzyme complex, substrate K47. He scanned the labels frantically, aware that every second increased the chance of being discovered. There, third shelf behind a row of human antibiotics, Jake grabbed 3 vials, enough for Myra's treatment with some to spare, and stuffed them in his toolkit. That's when the alarm went off. Jake's heart nearly stopped. He didn't know what he'd triggered, maybe a weight sensor on the shelf, maybe a silent alarm on the medication itself, but it didn't matter. He had maybe 30 seconds before security arrived. He ran. The corridors blurred as he sprinted through the medical bay, taking turns at random, trying to lose any pursuit. He could hear shouts behind him, the heavy footfalls of security guards. His lungs burned. His toolkit banged against his leg, but he kept running because stopping meant failure, and failure meant a baby died. Jake burst through an emergency exit and found himself in a maintenance shaft. He climbed down 2 levels, his hands slipping on the ladder rungs, then squeezed through a ventilation duct that he'd scouted weeks ago. It was barely wide enough for his shoulders, and the metal scraped his skin, but it would get him out of the medical sector. He emerged in a storage bay, gasping for breath, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might explode. In the distance, he could still hear alarms, could hear security teams organizing search patterns, but he'd made it. He had the enzymes. Now he just had to get back to Zara without being caught. It took 45 minutes of careful navigation through maintenance tunnels and service corridors. Jake's hands were shaking by the time he knocked on Zara's door with their special pattern. When she opened it and saw his disheveled state, her eyes widened. "Please tell me you got them," she said. Jake pulled the vials from his toolkit with trembling hands. 3 vials, that enough? More than enough. Zara grabbed them and immediately got to work preparing the treatment. Lissa looked at Jake with tears streaming down her orange cheeks. "You're bleeding," she said, noticing the scrapes on his arms from the ventilation duct. "I'm fine," Jake said, though he was starting to crash from the adrenaline rush. "How's Myra?" "Worse, but if this works." Lissa couldn't finish the sentence. Zara administered the enzyme treatment intravenously, her hands steady despite the improvised conditions. Then came the waiting. Long, agonizing minutes where the only sound was Myra's labored breathing and the hum of Zara's equipment. Then, slowly, Myra's breathing began to even out. Her skin started regaining its vibrant orange hue. Her tiny fingers uncurled from the fists they'd been clenched in. "It's working," Zara said quietly. "She's stabilizing." Lissa collapsed against Jake, sobbing with relief. He held her awkwardly, not quite sure what to do with his hands, overwhelmed by the enormity of what had just happened. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. "Thank you," Lissa whispered against his shoulder. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. You saved her. You saved my baby." "We all did," Jake said, looking at Zara. "Team effort." "A team effort that's going to have consequences," Zara pointed out. "Station security will be looking for whoever stole those enzymes. They'll review surveillance footage, interview witnesses. Eventually, they'll figure out it was you." Jake nodded slowly. He'd known this was coming. "How long do I have? Maybe a day, maybe less." "Then I'd better make it count." Jake looked at Lissa and Myra, the baby now sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. "You two need to get off this station. Zara, can you help them? I have contacts who smuggle refugees to safer systems. But Jake, what about you?" I'll figure something out. I always do. That night, Jake helped Zara arrange passage for Lissa and Myra on a cargo ship bound for the inner colonies, where the Koltari had established a refugee community. It cost most of his remaining credits plus a few favors, but it was worth it. As he watched them board the ship in the cargo bay, Lissa turned back one last time. "Come with us," she said. "You can't stay here, they'll arrest you." Jake smiled. "I've got other people to help here, other babies who might need saving. Besides, someone's got to keep Zara out of trouble." "You're the one who brings me trouble," Zara muttered, but there was affection in her voice. Lissa stepped closer to Jake and pressed something into his hand, a small pendant on a chain made of what looked like crystallized amber. "This is a Koltari prayer stone. It's said to bring courage to those who do what others won't. I can think of no one more deserving." Jake clutched the pendant, emotion tightening his throat. "Take care of her, Myra, tell her. Tell her she's got a hell of a mom. I'll tell her she had a guardian angel, a stubborn human who refused to accept no for an answer." The ship departed 20 minutes later. Jake watched it disappear into the stars, then turned to find a station security team waiting for him. They'd tracked him to the cargo bay. Of course they had. "Jake Morrison," the lead officer said, "you're under arrest for theft of medical supplies and unauthorized access to restricted areas." Jake held out his wrists for the restraints. "Yeah, I figured. Why'd you do it? You had to know you'd get caught." Jake looked up at the stars where Lissa and Myra's ship had vanished. "Because someone needed help and I could give it. That's all the reason I need." The trial was quick. Jake pled guilty to all charges. The prosecutor wanted to make an example of him. Theft from a military facility was serious business. But then something unexpected happened. Refugees started showing up to the courthouse. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Beings Jake had helped over the past 3 months, people he'd barely remembered, all testifying on his behalf. "He gave me his food ration when my family was starving. He carried my injured son to the medical bay on his back. He taught me universal standards so I could find work. He sat with my mother when she was dying so she wouldn't be alone." The stories went on and on. And in the back of the courtroom, via video link from the inner colonies, was Lissa holding a healthy, laughing Myra. "He saved my daughter's life," Lissa said, her voice clear and strong. "When everyone else said no, when the system failed us, when we had no hope left, Jake Morrison did what no one else would. He saw a being in need and acted with courage and compassion. That's not a criminal, that's a hero." The judge, a grizzled Terran veteran, looked at Jake for a long moment. "Mr. Morrison, you broke several laws. There's no disputing that. However, in light of the circumstances and the testimony provided, I'm sentencing you to time served plus 1,000 hours of community service at the refugee center. You'll be under supervision, and any further violations will result in immediate incarceration. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Jake said, barely able to believe it. "And Mr. Morrison, next time someone needs help, try to find a legal way to provide it. You're no good to anyone in jail." Jake grinned. "I'll do my best, Your Honor." 6 months later, Jake was still volunteering at the refugee center, now officially employed as a coordinator. He wore Lissa's prayer stone every day, a reminder of why he did this work. The system was still broken, the bureaucracy still heartless, and there were still too many beings falling through the cracks. But every day, Jake showed up. And every day, he did what no one else would. He helped.